results up. So Marcella, do you want to review those poll results?
Sure. So about only 50% of the attendees filled it out. So the question was, have you completed the appropriate training to do your job? And 9 out of the 10 said yes, 1 said no.
Awesome. So I think that's overall a relatively good sign that for the most part, people have completed the training to do their jobs. So as you're getting later into your summer terms, hopefully, and I think we see by the results that people have been provided with that training and the opportunities to do that training. So a good sign for sure. Should we go into our second poll?
Sure. 1 second. I'm doing a variety of roles today here, so.
Thanks, Marcella.
There we go.
OK, alors la deuxième question, c'est est-ce que les tâches que vous ont été confiées vous interpellent elles? So do the tasks you've been given challenge you? So we'll give you some time to provide your responses. This is sort of an ongoing sort of challenge to department heads and to managers and directors over the last number of years has been to give students meaningful work and to give them tasks that are not, simply tasks that have been put aside or on a clerical basis or are, sort of straightforward administrative tasks, but to give them tasks that will give them an insight into, what they would be good at in government. Alors, je pense que les dernières années, le gouvernement du Canada et puis le clerc du conseil privé, le greffier du conseil privé, a fait un défi au département de travailler pour qu'ils ont des tâches qui sont un défi pour les participants, qui sont intéressants, qui engagent les étudiants. So how are we looking on the polling?
So this time we had half of you answer. So every question we're getting a little more of you to answer back. So about 10 of you said, 83% said yes, that you've been given challenging work, and 17% said no. Okay.
So I think overall that's a good result to have 83% of people saying that the tasks they've been given have challenged them. Certainly a positive step, and I think something we would have had very different results had we posed that question in 2015 or in 2014. I sometimes share a story about a student who worked in an adjacent section when I was a new public servant, and his task for the entire summer was managing the manager's inbox and reducing the amount of emails that she had, and that was his only task for the entire summer. So would he have answered positively to that type of question? Probably not. But also I think in 2020 we see a better variety of tasks being assigned. Marcella, go ahead.
I was just going to say there's a question about the poll. Where are we supposed to write the answer to the question? So if you're, for whatever reason, unable to actually select one of the choices in the poll, after Josh reads the question, you can always just put your answer in the chat space.
Excellent. Yeah, and it will depend what you're logging into Zoom from as to how it will show up. So if you're a participant on a desktop, it will usually just pop up on your screen. But if you're logging in on a mobile device, it might have a different sort of impact, or it might have sort of more limited functionality.
Hey, Josh.
Yes.
I was going to add, you think that that's about a summer job when I was a summer student in the government? True story, very long time ago. My job was to take the contents of files and open the file, take the contents, put them into a different color file folder, close that folder, and then put it on the shelf. I did that for 10 weeks, changing the color of the file folder. So all I did all day was open a file folder, take out the paper, put it in another file folder, put it back on the shelf. I'm pretty sure a trained monkey could have been trained to do that. So I felt pretty bad for myself, but I made a lot of money. But it was challenging? No, and I don't even put it on my resume because it's embarrassing. But yeah, it's true that we've come a long way in trying to develop our students. It is great that we pay our students fairly well, but it is important that we're giving them some life experiences, some transferable skills, some competencies that will actually help them in the real world. Yeah. I didn't gain any valuable experience in that job.
No, and Arthur, we haven't heard from you yet. So what was your first sort of summer student job in the government?
My first summer student position was a junior analyst, so I did data analysis at Statistics Canada, so it was pretty meaningful, but it was about 7 years ago when I started, so I guess the new policies were in place or starting to trickle into place.
Yeah, neat. All right, we'll move on to our third poll. So, alors, la troisième question pour vous comme participants. So, Marcel, if you want to pop that on screen. So, the third question is, have you been provided with feedback to improve? Alors, avez-vous reçu un retour d'information vous permettant de vous améliorer? So I think this is another key factor over the last number of years has been to give meaningful and constructive feedback to students on the tasks that they do and how they can improve, how they can build their professional experience. And for many of you, this might have been your first opportunity to have sort of that office job. So what does that look like in terms of from a behavioral perspective, from a working with teammates kind of perspective, from understanding technology, all that sort of stuff. So have you been given that feedback to improve, so either by your manager or by your supervisor? So we'll give you another few seconds to answer that poll, and then we'll bring up the results. But Jen or Arthur or Marcella, any experience sort of in terms of getting feedback as a student in government or in other positions?
I came in through the CRA, and when I was a university student. So the CRA is a little bit more structured and rigid with their feedback. So I definitely got lots of feedback, and formal and informal, in my early on in my career. Yeah,
that makes sense. And Jen, your thoughts?
I'm thinking about my other jobs as a summer student for the Federal Public Service. I had a couple of different departments that I worked for. I would say I didn't get a lot of feedback when I was a student specifically. I did get a lot of feedback when I became an indeterminate employee, but no, as a summer student, I think that, again, I'm considerably older. So I think back then they just kind of gave you whatever job that no one else wanted to do. And they just kind of said, like, just sit here and do this. And at one point I was a receptionist, and my job was just to make sure I sat at the desk. And they actually didn't give me anything to do. I sat there all day. And I remember one day I was so bored, I painted my nails because I was like, I'm losing my mind. So I would ask for work, but they didn't trust me to do anything. And I think that those days are probably what has given us the result that we have today, that we're trying to give our students meaningful work to do, because again, like, I didn't learn anything, and it was all cool to get paid a lot of money, but the days were so long. I remember how long the days were. I couldn't wait, like 4 o'clock could not come fast enough. And I think even now, and I know that Marcella and Josh and I work on files together all the time, like now the day flies by, and sometimes my family's making dinner and I'm still working away. So I think that really is an indication of when you're doing good work and work that you're interested in that's challenging you.
And I see, Marcella, we have the results to the poll.
Yeah, so have you been provided with feedback to improve? It's about 50-50 because we have a yes in our chat space. So that's an interesting number. 50% have not received any feedback to improve. So I think there's always room for improvement in any job that you do, and at any level, at any point in your career. But anyways, Josh, I'll let you.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of an important point to look at as we're now at the end of July. So you're probably wrapping up your summer work term over the next few weeks, and this would be a great opportunity to sort of start that discussion around, like, what's the plan in terms of receiving feedback, in terms of completing an evaluation. Can you use this manager or your supervisor as a reference? Can you get a letter of recommendation? Alors, je pense que c'est un temps, une bonne opportunité à ce temps de avoir cette discussion avec ton gestionnaire ou ton superviseur, de solliciter cette information, de voir qu'est-ce que vous pouvez faire dans le futur pour improver. So I think this is the time to really solicit that feedback and say, okay, I'd really like to know, how I've been doing, has it been meeting expectations, and going forward, what should I be working on? So I know, sometimes that might be behavioral things. It might be, okay, actually, like, we're in, you know, in a normal circumstance in an office environment, sometimes it's, okay, well, you have to stick to a fixed schedule. We kind of need to know where you are, you know, both from a health and safety perspective and from a perspective of, you know, so what you're working on and where you're working on that. In terms of, you know, with this virtual environment, it could be different. It could be, you know, the communication piece to work on of, you know, being able to provide your supervisor, your manager with enough information about the task that you're working on. Alors, je pense qu'il y a beaucoup d'éléments à avoir l'information sur ton performance, mais je pense que ce n'est pas juste le cas de avoir l'information au fin du temps, mais de voir pour votre futur. So to look at how this will impact sort of your future in terms of, you know, your next placement and how you can improve going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Arthur,
Josh,
oh, sorry, Jen, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that if you haven't gotten any feedback yet, there can be a lot of different reasons. We are in the middle of what is essentially a crisis. And so managers are trying to put out fires all day, and let's give them a little bit of credit. Let's assume that their intentions are good and that maybe they just don't have time to sit down and have meaningful conversations with each of their employees about the direction of their career and their competencies and how they can improve and things like that. And you may have to solicit those conversations from your manager. In some cases, in a crisis like this, no news is good news. So you can assume you're doing a good job if you haven't heard from your manager, but it is good to try to find time to schedule that. And I know, for example, Josh, when was the last time you told Marcella she was doing a good job? Like, we both think she's doing an amazing job, but we don't sit down and tell her that very often because we're busy putting out fires. And I think that that's a perspective to keep in mind as well, that these aren't traditional times and that our managers are dealing with different things. So if you want FaceTime with your manager to solicit that feedback, you probably will have to ask for it this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Arthur, your thoughts around soliciting feedback as a student, how to sort of make the best use of that type of input?
As a student, just request for feedback from your direct supervisor, and if your direct supervisor doesn't give you advice, move up the ladder and talk to your manager. And if your manager doesn't provide you with meaningful feedback, you can always go to your, I guess, your assistant director or then your director. I remember during the chief statistician, so basically our deputy minister at Statistics Canada, every year they host a chief statistician annual address to students. And at that event, he told all students, about 300 students, that if you don't have any meaningful work, you can freely send me an email and I will find you meaningful work to do at our agency. So you can always go up the ladder to the very top, because students are a valuable and dedicated resource in the government of Canada. We value them.
Absolutely. And I see in the Q&A we have a question, and you know, it being an open forum, I think this is a good time probably to chime in and answer that. So the question, Arthur and Jen, you see that on screen, and Marcella? Okay, perfect. So the question is, I'm graduating in December and I'm interested in pursuing a career with federal government. What is the best way to stay informed of career opportunities? And do you have any recommendations or tips for gaining entry into federal government following the conclusion of school / migration into a full-time position and away from summer placements? So I think this is an excellent question. And this is a great opportunity for us to plug the closing event for summer students that will be happening on August 19th. So that event will really focus on next steps for students. So as you're finishing your time and looking towards, you know, possibly a bridging opportunity to move into a full-time role, or looking at the host of post-secondary recruitment programs that are available. Alors, je pense que pour cette question, ça va être adressé d'une façon plus approfondie au événement de clôture pour les étudiants. Alors, c'est le 19 août, et puis on va mettre l'information pour vous inscrire dans la fonction chat. So we'll put the registration information in the chat space, and certainly encourage all of you to attend that, because we'll really go into greater depth around post-secondary recruitment and all the programs that exist to move into the federal government. But I guess from a tips and tricks perspective, maybe Jen, let's start with you in terms of sort of tips around, wanting to move into a full-time role and how to kind of stay informed.
My personal tips would be social media, following what's going on in the government, in the public service, in the departments you're interested in the Federal Youth Network, in the Interdepartmental Student Committee. Soyez à l'aise d'ajouter des gens qui ont des postes que vous aimez ou que vous aimeriez en savoir plus. Following up on interesting departments, interesting jobs, and things like that. GC Collab allows you to stay connected even if you aren't a federal public servant. If you are a student, you can stay active on GC Collab while you are going back to school. So if you don't have an indeterminate job, that's a good way to stay up to date. Obviously, there's all the traditional ways to kind of watch what's happening in the job market, like jobs.gc.ca, but we do see a lot of changes in the way that hiring is happening and things like that. And of course, like Josh mentioned, on August 19th, there'll be an event about what to do after your work term if you are interested in becoming a public servant. But I think that really social media has become the best way to find out about the coolest jobs maybe in the public service. So yeah, maybe, and we're on all the different platforms. I think most networks and committees are on different platforms as well. So you can choose the platform you're most comfortable with. You don't have to necessarily use Twitter, which seems to be what we prefer, but there's Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. There's the GC tools as well. So yeah, that's my advice. Stay connected.
And not to keep shamelessly plugging at FYN, on August 13th, I'm just looking at my calendar, we have like a presentation from Talent Cloud, and which is a kind of a whole different way of now that they're piloting hiring, which is related to skill recognition and trust in that skill, etc. So, I mean, for all the students that are on today, that would be another platform that you want to become familiar with. So make sure to come to our session, learn about what Talent Cloud is, what kind of skills they're looking for. And that's another platform. And with the CRA, because I'm from the CRA substantively, I know that you can set up your career alert watches. And really, I think the most important thing that I've learned in my time with FYN since February has been networking and building those networks, and and building relationships with people has been so important, and participating in as much as I can. We can't participate in everything, but be choosy. What are the communities out there that are going to work to your advantage and that speak to your skills and to your qualities? So that's a tip that I would give to all of you.
Absolutely. Arthur, anything to add around the recruitment piece and how to get into government?
It's all dependent on your personal preference and what avenue you prefer to choose. But for me, I would make my case or my interest known to my direct supervisor and have him or her speak on my behalf. And if all goes well, then all goes well. If it doesn't, then try HR at your department or agency. Sometimes your department or agency has pools dedicated for public sector, student recruitment at the end of the day. So try HR as well and reach out. Try to talk to as many people as you can.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think many, if not most departments keep a list of bridgeable students. So je pense que chaque département a un système pour les étudiants d'intégrer ces étudiants après leur terme. Si ça intéresse les étudiants et puis les gestionnaires. So definitely, I think you had a very key point in terms of, know what the departmental process is and make sure that you're involved in that. It's not really a matter of, your manager has to be the one to hire you. It might be that, there's an opportunity in a completely different area, but it fits your skill set, fits your experience, fits your education. So look for those opportunities for sure. And Jen, just to summarize some of your thoughts, alors utilisez les sites comme GC, Emploi GC, et puis avoir les liens à les autres communautés, les autres départements. Alors l'ARC, par exemple, pour la plupart les processus différents de recrutement, et puis Ça dépend de chaque département. Et si tu veux avoir comme un fil assez grand, c'est bon d'avoir la connaissance des corporations aussi qui sont dans le gouvernement, comme le SCHL, c'était mon premier employeur. So be aware of crown corporations as well and other opportunities that to work in sort of the broader public service. So, Canada Post, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation are just two examples of, sizable corporations that are, under the government of Canada sphere, but as separate employers at Crown Corps. So there are different ways to find opportunities. Jen, go ahead.
I think that Josh, that Arthur touched on something really important, and it is about your manager knowing what your aspirations are and what you want to do. And that goes hand in hand with having a solid reputation and good references. And so making sure that your manager knows what you have done, what you can do, and thinking that you are a good employee is really important, because they do end up sometimes advocating for you behind the scenes when we're looking at bridging, because it may not be your manager that is able to bridge you or to rehire you, but they may refer you to someone else who is looking. And so that's always really important to be conscious of in the public service, because we are one large employer.
Definitely. Okay, Marcella, should we go to poll number 4? All right. Alors, la 4e question, c'est savez-vous que votre travail a un impact plus important sur le travail de l'équipe et du service? So are you aware of how the work you do makes a greater impact on the work of the team and the department? So I think this is another really key question. Have you, no matter what task you're doing and no matter where you're doing that task, are you aware, or has your manager or supervisor helped to sort of create awareness of the impact that work has? So I see a positive yes in the chat, which is great. And we'll give a few more seconds for people to answer that one.
It's anonymous, so if you feel no, you can put no. Don't let us put pressure on you.
Yeah, and this is a key question as well for usually for like the public service employee survey and all of the types of surveys that come out, is people kind of understanding the impact that they have. And certainly, I've had it managed employees from levels of, clerical work all the way up to, senior immigration officers. And oftentimes, it's people anywhere in that spectrum who don't necessarily feel that link to the work that they're doing. So Marcella, over to you for results. And these look amazing. And Marcella, I think you're on mute.
I keep muting myself, sorry, because I'm typing at the same time a lot of times. Anyways, 93% of the respondents said yes, and 7% said no. We also have a yes, so that kind of skews our numbers a little bit to the positive side in the chat space.
Awesome.
Yes.
So those are excellent results, and I think that maybe speaks very much to sort of improved communication that we've seen with managers and students over the last number of years. So that is awesome to see those kind of numbers.
For sure, I think if I had been a student and answering that question when I started my career, there's no way that I would have known what I was doing in the tax pipeline actually impacted the public service, right? Like, it took many years for me to understand that, how the taxation feeds into our greater government and the good that it does, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a great number.
Yeah, absolutely. Jen, any thoughts around that in terms of, purpose and making those connections?
I think that no matter what you're doing, odds are there's a reason that it needs to be done. So the examples that I used about having to sit at the front desk, well, I had to sit there in case someone came in, and we had to take care of our clients. And the same thing with changing our file folders. So there was a reason that we were changing our color coding file system. And I think when that's explained to you, you start to understand a little bit about why it's important. But lots of us do parts of our job that we don't see value in and that we don't feel attached to, and that's okay as long as you can find other things within your role that you do feel purpose in. And if the role that you're doing for a certain part of your career you just don't feel adds the kind of value you want to add, sometimes you can find something to do on the corner of your desk that contributes in the way that you want to contribute.
Absolutely.
And a lot of our networks, FYN is one of them, that you can get involved and volunteer and help with something else. GCWCC, Public Service Week, all of those other things. Like there's ways you can get involved to make the kind of contribution that you want.
Absolutely. Arthur, as our stats guy, any thoughts around positive stats for purpose and value of the work that people are doing?
For purpose and value of working in your department or agency, I remember when I was a student, I was told to memorize the mandate of our department or agency prior to going to a job interview. And I didn't really understand what the mandate is, but I was told to memorize it, so I memorized it because I wanted a job. So when I did get the job, as I entered in the building, there's a plaque at Statistics Canada saying that we provide meaningful and high quality data to Canadians. So every day I would see this mandate plaque posted, and I didn't really understand what a mandate was. Then I looked into the private sector and understood that our mandate is basically what the private sector's mission statement is. So I equated the two, and I realized that every department and agency, there is a mandate. So then I grouped all the mandates together, and after all mandates together, they actually form the goal or the policies of the government as a whole. So then I understood the big picture, I guess, of what mandates are.
Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. Okay, so we'll move on to the final polling question, and then get into some open discussion. As a reminder, please use the Q&A function if you'd like to ask any questions today, and we will bring those up as they are asked. Alors, s'il vous plaît, utilisez le fonction des questions et réponses. Alors, c'est sur votre écran, et puis tu peux demander les questions comme ça, et on va donner les réponses dans la langue de votre choix. If you don't have a Q&A function, please feel free to use the chat to ask questions there, if depending on what device you're using, it's not available. Okay, so question number 5. So have you used outside of the box thinking, providing innovation, improvement, and change? So I think this question is really about, have you been kind of given an opportunity to kind of innovate, share your ideas, and come up with, different ways of approaching solutions. Alors, en français, avez-vous utilisé la réflexion hors des sentiers battus en apportant des innovations, des améliorations et des changements? Alors, est-ce que tu as eu l'opportunité d'innover, de donner des idées? Thinking back to my early time at CRA, I think it was sort of early in a mandate of really trying to rethink a lot of services. This was sort of early 2010s. And lots of things came out of that, like autofill my return and these ideas that came from other countries. But at the time, those would have been, very outside of the box ideas for CRA in terms of how we administer taxes in Canada. So Marcel, will go to you for results. And sorry, you're on mute again.
Sorry. So the results are 71% said yes, that they've used outside the box thinking or provided innovation, improvement, or change. And 29% said no. And perhaps that's just lack of opportunity. Who knows, right?
Okay.
Maybe you can maybe they can comment in the chat space as to why they haven't.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so of course, feel free to provide any of your thoughts in terms of, either on the positive or the challenging side of, like, have you felt like your ideas are, sort of that you have an environment where you can bring up ideas. Mm-hmm. This again speaks to a lot of the questions that come out on the Public Service Employee Survey. Do I feel comfortable bringing forward new ideas? Do I feel like there's an environment and an appetite for that? And lots of these are also principles around beyond 2020. Alors, programme au-delà de 2020, c'est structuré sur ces idées comme est-ce que je peux apporter mes idées à ma gestionnaire pour dire comme j'ai une nouvelle façon que je pense qu'on peut faire cela. Est-ce qu'ils sont réceptifs à cette type d'idée ou est-ce qu'ils rejettent cette type d'idée? So when you bring an idea forward, is it quickly rejected, or are you told like, well, we've done it this way for this number of years, so we're not going to rethink that? I think overall, it sounds like that culture is changing, and overall those are pretty positive results, but certainly more sort of divided, and I think we see a lot of cultural differences among departments in terms of whether they've kind of advanced a culture of innovation and of people bringing forward ideas. Arthur, any thoughts around that? So bringing forward ideas and innovation and being able to innovate in your role as a student?
Bring forward innovative ideas. Try speaking to your supervisor or your manager first and express your ideas to them, and sell your idea to them, just like how you do in the private sector. Sell your idea and talk what are the advantages or disadvantages of your idea to them, and make your case known. If you want to be more, I guess, aggressive in your ideas, then try to find committees in your department or agency that address your concern or your ideas, and try to elaborate those to the committees and advance your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Jen, any thoughts around this question?
I feel like this is going to be a public servant answer, so I'm not 100% sure, but my gut kind of tells me sometimes you need to get the lay of the land before you can make good suggestions. So especially now where everyone's working from home, we're all making big suggestions about big changes all the time, and there's nothing wrong with not making suggestions and just watching, listening, figuring out what can be done and what can't be done before you come up with a suggestion. And I find that just comes with experience. I know that the work that Josh and I do is a lot of putting puzzle pieces together for other people, but just like when you open a box with puzzle pieces, some are still upside down. So you need to flip over all your puzzle pieces so you can see what you're working with before you can start innovating and coming up with creative ideas. So if you haven't suggested an amazing way to innovate, or you haven't taken a big initiative, like, don't worry, there's lots of time for that. Make sure that when you're making suggestions that they're well thought out and that you can back them up with processes and other ideas and things where there's synergies in other programs and other places, which isn't a way for me to say don't innovate. It's just a way for me to say when you innovate, you want to really look at it from a 360. And so you want to make sure that you know enough about what it is that you're proposing to know what they're going to come back with as far as questions and challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question in the chat around how do we sign up for the Talent Cloud session on August 13th? So we're in the process of setting up the registration links for all of our August sessions. So I would follow our Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or all of them for information about upcoming sessions, and those will go online really next week in terms of those registration links. Just sort of adding on to what you mentioned, Jen, I know my first ever experience in government was as a crew leader with the census of 2006, which certainly dates me. In terms of that being a good number of years ago. Et je pense que j'avais l'opportunité de comme changer comment je pouvais faire ce travail, mais il y avait des tâches qui étaient assez fixes de comment ils sont faits et le type d'information qu'on a besoin. So in that role, there was sort of a mix of, you could figure out how you did your workload, how many times you met up with your enumerators, the ways that you would sort of manage, their work. But there were things that were very fixed. The type of information that we collect is very fixed. That we need census forms back from every household, that is fixed. So there were understandings around like what was your sort of sphere of, influence and being able to manage your own workload, and what was a hard and fast, like, here's how we have to deliver this program. So that, I think, is, as Jen mentioned, I think that's a great way to kind of look at your environment of like what is fixed and what is sort of flexible in terms of, you know, areas to innovate, areas to provide your ideas. Okay, so moving on. So I see we don't have any questions at the moment in the Q&A function. So we'll go to some questions that we had prepared for the session. So Arthur, maybe I'll start by posing this one to you. So the question is, how do I make sure my boss knows my output? So knows what I'm working on, what I've accomplished in the role. Alors, en français, je m'excuse, mais tu peux avoir les réponses en anglais, mais la question en français, c'est comment est-ce que je peux m'assurer que mon employeur connaît ma production? So how do I make sure that my manager knows what I've worked on, knows what I've accomplished?
Oh, c'est une bonne question. So to answer that, just try to request a one-on-one meeting with your supervisor or your manager and ask them to review what you've done with them. If they list items that you did not do, or they did not list any items that you did do, tell them and communicate to them and have it written on paper. And then just try to request a one-on-one meeting. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, sounds good.
Josh, I'll just jump in here for just a bit because I was thinking about this question, and just to build on Arthur's answer, I think it's really important for you as a student and then moving throughout your career to have those regular conversations. And you know, they don't have to be super formal all the time. But one of the things that I was seeing, because I'm a team leader as well, and I had a team of 19 to 20 people before I came on to FYN actually. And it's really important also, and it shows your own leadership qualities when you have that regular conversation, and as Arthur was saying, to have it written down. But maybe as the employee or as the student, you kind of write and saying, hey, Jen, thanks for meeting with me. These are some of the things that we reviewed, and you could do that for the team leader as well. I know that we expect a lot sometimes out of our team leaders, but sometimes they have huge teams. So it's a good idea. And I think it's a good practice for all of us to kind of get into that, you know, learning to email between people, to have that written confirmation, but it doesn't always have to come down. It can also go up.
Yeah, absolutely. Jen, your thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts on this one. So if your manager isn't checking in on what you're doing, they're assuming that you're doing what you were tasked to do. So I think that that's fair. If I assume you're not doing what I asked you to do, then I'm going to follow up with you. But otherwise, I'm assuming that you're doing what you are supposed to be doing. So following up by email, I see that that's a trend in the chat. I think that that's good, especially if you as an individual want to document what you have done, and then that helps you to have that in writing as well for yourself. But I think for me, the bigger question here is about engagement and motivation. And if you know you need a pat on the back to stay engaged and motivated, then that's a discussion you should be open to having with your manager. One of my most favorite things, Josh knows, is the languages of appreciation in the workplace. And some people need to hear from their boss, woohoo, Marcella, you're rocking it. Thanks so much for all you're doing. We couldn't live without you. You are the anchor of our team. Thank you for coming to work every day with a smile on your face. And some people don't need that. And so it's important for your manager to know what they're dealing with. And those are some discussions that you should have. It depends how long your term is with a certain employer, but if you become an indeterminate employee, that's something that you should always be discussing with your manager. A team leader like Marcella probably recognizes those things in their team. Some people like post-it notes, some people like thank yous by email, some people like a conversation, whatever it is that people like, but it's important as far as engagement goes, because if you think no one notices what you're doing, and you think that they don't know that you're doing a good job, then your level of engagement decreases, and that's not good for them either. Alors, c'est vraiment important de démontrer l'appréciation pour les autres avec le travail qu'ils font. Puis la manière, c'est encore plus important de démontrer.
Wait,
Yeah. And Jen, to build even further on that, and it's come up on a lot of our FYN sessions here, is that virtually you have to have that initial conversation, I think, with your manager, your team leader, whoever it is, because it's a lot harder for team leaders to ascertain, like, Arthur, maybe you don't need a pat on the back right? Like what Jen was saying about me every once a week. But perhaps there are other people who do. So that's a really important part of the conversation when you first come on. And I agree that it also depends on how long your term is. Like if you're on for 2 months, that might look very different than if you have a term of 6 months, right? So anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a question in the Q&A. So we'll go to answer that. So the question is, do you have any experience with Canada's free agent program? And if so, what kind of work did you do? Alors, en français, est-ce que tu as d'expérience avec le programme des agents libres et quelle sorte de travail est-ce que vous avez fait? So I'll start off by prefacing this and saying that none of us who are on the line today are or have been free agents. That being said, I think there are some things that we should probably highlight about the free agent program. So some keys, if you're looking at it from a student perspective, one of the keys is that you can't be hired in directly to the free agent program from being a student. To apply for the program, you already need to be a permanent, full-time Government of Canada employee. It doesn't matter what level that is at, but it does matter that you already are in the government and full-time. That being said, I think there have been free agents who have gone into that program with 2 years of experience in the government, with 10 years of experience, with 25 years of experience. So they've taken a kind of a wide swath of people from various backgrounds and various levels. And I think another key thing to think about is that the experience of each of those free agents is very different. So I think we know some free agents where, you know, they change jobs every 2 or 3 months and they have a very defined skill set. Thinking maybe of, you know, Todd Lyons, who works on podcasts and actually sort of started a side career, I think, as a podcaster while working in government. And now he does that as a free agent. If a department is like, hey, we want to launch some digital programming, some podcasting, can you come in for 3 months, teach us how to do it, and then move on to your next assignment. And then there are some who have gone on assignments for 12 or 18 months at a time. Mais je pense que l'expérience c'est vraiment différent pour chaque agent libre. Et puis, c'est bon de savoir seulement que le programme s'est ouvert à les employés à plein temps qui sont permanents. Jen, Marcella, are there any other thoughts to share on the free agent program?
Can I go first? Because I was just about to type my answer, but it's too long. I think the free agent program itself is one thing, but if you look at your career as a public servant and not as an employee of a certain department or agency, then essentially we're all types of free agents once you're an indeterminate public servant. In that, you can take assignments within your own department, you can do secondments outside your department without ever giving up your substantive role. So you can try some different jobs or lend your expertise to a different department or different team. Marcella's working with us on a micro mission, which means that her department is letting her come and work with FYN to gain some new competencies and try some new skills while we get to benefit from her skills on our team. And so there are lots of ways to do free agent type of work without actually becoming a free agent, because one thing that Josh mentioned about being a free agent, that is something you need to keep in the back of your mind if you're a new public servant, is when you become a free agent, you become a free agent at the level that you're at. And so if you're at an entry-level position in the organization and you become a free agent, then that's the level of your free agent assignments. Now, there are some exceptions and that does get a little bit more complicated, but you'd have to be sure that you're comfortable with your salary range when you become a free agent, because you take assignments at that level. Whereas if you want to take acting and secondment and micro missions, then you can kind of keep building your career at the same time. So it depends on where you're at in your career and your motivation for being interested in the free agent program.
Yeah, absolutely. Arthur, Marcella, anything to add?
I found out about the free agent because of FYN, and again, a shameless plug. We do have a session probably recorded with a presentation in our FYN wiki page if you are interested in learning more about free agents from Laura Colella. But yeah, like, I mean, I think one of the important things to know about free agents also, and I think it was Jen who in her wisdom kind of imparted on me earlier on, was that it's also, you have to have a certain number of competencies, right? Like they are looking for 14 kind of attributes, and that sometimes does come through experience. So if you don't, let's say you're applying and you don't get it right away, it doesn't mean that you can't get there. It's just that perhaps you need more experience under your belt with the public service and with the government.
Yeah, absolutely. Arthur, any thoughts on free agents or
I'm not aware of the free agent program, but hearing about it sounds so interesting. I might sign up tomorrow for it.
Okay. And for those of you who are in permanent positions, the deadline to apply to the free agent program is August 7th, I believe. And you can find more information on their Twitter page or their various social media channels. It's at Free Agent Libre on Twitter, so bilingually. So it's Agent Libre in French. So Free Agent Libre or Free Agent Libre. On Twitter, and we can add the links in the chat. Jen, je pense que tu as mentionné un point important, c'est que tu peux gérer ton carrière de n'importe quelle façon. Alors, tu peux gérer ton carrière comme un agent libre, ou tu peux gérer ton carrière de changer seulement aux postes qui sont permanents. So I think Jen brought up a really good point in that your career management can be that of, being a free agent who takes an assignment here and there and using, different mechanisms to do that. It's really sort of up to you and to, what interests you, and whether, you want to be somewhere for 2 years at a time or 6 months at a time, or jump to the next, sort of high profile project, and, be going at that 100% for that period of time. Alors, je pense que c'est important de voir cette perspective que les agents libres, c'est seulement une des façons de changer de type de travail et de carrière de façon plus fréquemment. So it's really just one way that you can kind of switch between those roles sort of more frequently, but there are certainly many other programs that you can do that with, and ways that you can kind of manage your career. So going to our next question, I think we probably have time for maybe 2 more questions. And some of our polling has already covered off some of these. So one sort of general one, so how do I deal with conflict? So as a student, hopefully you haven't encountered that much conflict in your work environments, given that we're in a virtual environment, but certainly it is something that people can encounter when they're sort of the new person into a team, and they may encounter more resistance from people who have many more years of experience, or different challenges when you're the new person on the team. But how do you deal with conflict? So alors comment est-ce que vous pouvez comme gérer les conflits dans votre équipe? So Arthur, maybe we'll go to you in terms of some first thoughts on that.
Well, that's a very good question. I remember that question being on my interview for my first position as a student. There's no 100% right answer to this question, I believe, but one approach that I would take would just be to communicate with your supervisor about the conflict, addressing it, and then try to think of actions or ways or measures to deal with the conflict and why the conflict occurred. So that's my best tip I can give to students. Talk to your direct supervisor.
Yeah, absolutely. Jen, your thoughts?
This is my fave. I could do a whole workshop. I'm like starting one over here in the chat. Well, okay. I think
we're looking more managing conflict. How to
deal, well,
not how to incite conflict.
I know I am good at conflict in general. So checking your own perceptions, I think, is important. Like clarifying if there actually is a conflict. I think a lot of times we're so conflict averse, especially with our work colleagues that sometimes we perceive a conflict and then we avoid it because we think it's a conflict, but actually it's not a conflict. So checking your perceptions by doing a little bit of research, checking what's going on in your mind. Are you just having a bad day? Because I know sometimes when I'm having a bad day, it seems like everything is worse than it actually is. So again, thinking about your own perceptions. There's a model that I love for dealing with conflict at work, and it's called the DESC model, DESC. And it's just a way to talk about what you perceive is going on, your feelings about what's going on, and how changing what's going on would help everyone in the long run. So that's something to look up. I'm sure there's lots of training online as well at the Canada School on their GC campus. I don't want to take up all the airtime because I could talk all day about conflict at work. Marcella, do you have anything about conflict at work?
I do actually. I was just going to add, I think most departments have like conflict resolution advisors as well. I know I have had a couple of conflicts, and mostly they've been when I've had to have conversations up. So like with my assistant director, and you're kind of scared, how are you going to approach this conversation? I contacted my conflict resolution advisor, she gave me some tips and tricks, and we practiced the conversation. And a lot of times the conflict is way bigger, and that conversation is going to be way more difficult in your own head than how it actually unfolds. Most people don't like conflict. So most people try to work with a person. I think one of the other important things is to know yourself and to know other people's communication styles. And I think that's kind of what Jen was saying as well. Like, you have to understand that some people, I'm super like in your face. Everybody knows my whole life, but not everybody likes that, right? Like, I know that some people get annoyed with me, which I'm like, oh my God, but it's true. So I have to be aware that, that person, I'm not going to be liked by everyone, and I don't need to be liked by everyone, but we all need to be respectful and be respected, right? So I think you have to keep all those kinds of things in mind when dealing with conflict and trying to keep it at the lowest possible level.
Oh, Marcella, you just touched on something. Okay, for sure, lowest possible level, because that always looks good on your resume. Don't escalate things that don't need to be escalated, because you always need a good story about how you resolved a conflict. Lowest possible level is super important. And I think that when we're looking at the ICMS practitioners, which you touched on, like that is also really important. So I think there's so much in there, self-awareness. Conflict doesn't have to be scary. It's important to figure out how to deal with it, and to deal with it early on and not build it up in your head and let it fester into something else. It's brilliant. Yeah.
And I think that you've before Jen mentioned Breen Brown, and how things in your head are much bigger sometimes than it actually is in real life.
Yeah, so, Brené Brown. Yeah, I'm all about that video. So she has a video on Netflix, Call to Courage, and she talks about the stories that you tell yourself. And when it comes to conflict in the workplace, the stories that we tell ourselves are so much worse than they actually are in real life. And we build them up into these big stories with big consequences. Then we just keep building them up. And really, that's really not what the other person intended at all. And so it's a good one.
All right. So I think we're at the end of our time, as we are at 2:28 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So a huge thank you to our panelists, Jen and Marcella and Arthur, for providing their thoughts and experience today. A huge thanks to all of you for attending from across Canada and across the public service, and sharing your questions and giving us all of your thoughts on the polling questions as well. I think that was super helpful to understand your perspective. Alors, les prochaines séances du série d'apprentissage virtuel vont être la semaine prochaine. Et je pense que la prochaine de ces séances, ça va être le 6, alors jeudi. So our next session will be on Thursday, August 6th. And you can find registration information for that shortly on our various social media channels. Certainly at FYN_RJFF on Twitter, Instagram, and as well on Facebook. Thanks for joining us today. Have an amazing long weekend, and we will see you next week for more engaging learning sessions for the FYN Virtual Learning Series. Alors, bonne fin de semaine tout le monde, Et puis, et une bonne week-end prolongé. Et puis, merci de nous joindre aujourd'hui et on va vous voir la semaine prochaine. So thanks everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
Merci.
Bye.
Bye.